everyone. We are right at 1 o'clock and we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So we'll go ahead and jump right on in. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kenita Williams, and I want to welcome you to today's Southern Education Leadership Initiative Prospective Fellows webinar. I am the Director of Leadership Development at the Southern Education Foundation. And in my role, I oversee SEF's leadership strategy, which includes signature programming like the Southern Education Leadership Initiative, or SELI, as we'll call it during the presentation. I'm really thankful for your time this afternoon and want to thank you for joining us. Really, the goal of this webinar is to provide a comprehensive overview of SELI, including kind of the program benefits, the application process, the fellowship experience, and also give you all some time to ask questions that you may have. I'll begin today by sharing a little bit about the Southern Education Foundation, followed by a quick snapshot of the SELI program, history, mission, benefits. This will be followed by a deeper dive into the application process. But the real important part of this is that you will actually get to hear directly from two of our SELI alum. So you can ask directly, ask questions directly to people who have done the experience. And after their presentation, we will use the balance of our time for your questions. So before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping things. We are recording this so we can share the recording and the webinar with those who have not joined us. So we ask you to mute your lines to minimize any background noise. Also, we have a chat function on the webinar. So if you have questions throughout, my colleague Reagan will be monitoring the chat box and will answer those. That you can also feel free to unmute and ask questions. And so that's it in terms of housekeeping. So I'll go ahead and jump right in and get us started. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the Southern Education. Founded in 1867 as the George Peabody Education Fund, SEF was founded in the wake of the Civil War, really to educate the newly emancipated slave population or former slave population, but also to unite the North and the South behind this idea of being responsible for educating the entire population, regardless of race. So really from our origins in the very beginning, we've been in this space for advocating for underserved communities. Today, we still do this work. Our mission is to advance creative solutions to ensure equity and excellence in education for low income students and students of color, particularly in the South. We are unapologetic proponents of public education, and we really do believe that when done right, public education is a vehicle to which all students are able to reach their full potential and be propelled to opportunity-rich lives. Next slide, please. So a few quick points specifically about our work. As you can tell from our name, our focus area is the Southern region. So we can cover 17 states and what is traditionally considered the American South, as well as a few states that are north of the Mason-Dixon line, like Missouri and Delaware and Maryland. We also, from another strategy or strand of our work, ties to our strategies, we do work across the entire education continuum, starting with early learning, all the way to post-secondary higher education. We even are saying that we are the P20 continuum because we resurrected some work around workforce development. And then lastly, our strategies. We have three really main channels or vehicles that we do to accomplish our mission. Our first is really kind of our research, which we call analysis and solutions. And that's really looking at the data and trends across the region to understand what's going on in education, particularly with education equity for students of color and low income students. Then we have our advocacy and government affairs, which is where we are working to use this information to equip different leaders and organizers to be able to advocate for the changes that we want to see in the system. This also includes some work with policymakers and working to advance racially conscious policies and practices. And then finally, we have our leadership development strand of work, which is my portfolio that I mentioned earlier. And this is really our area where we're working toward building or developing or cultivating a cadre of change agents, innovative thinkers, leaders that are equipped with the knowledge, perspective, and the tools to take our advocacy a step forward. And this is generally done in a fellowship model, and SELI falls into this bucket. Next slide, please. So I thought it was important to give a little bit of information and background about SEF, particularly since SELI is a core part of our strategy, our mission, our vision, and it directly, and how we view our work directly influences how we operate the SELI program and who we partner with. So just a little bit about SELI, its history and mission. So SELI was founded or created in 2004, really as a response to the anniversary of Brown v. Board. And the thought was, or to mark the anniversary of Brown v. Board, the landmark court case that desegregated schools. And the thought was that in order to fulfill the promises of Brown, we needed to create this next generation of thinkers and leaders to carry the work forward. We believe that our next generation of emerging and rising leaders are those people that have the big ideas and the hearts and the courage to really jump into the space where they can grow academically and professionally and use their skills to really advocate for change on behalf of our students. So we are now going into really into our 16th year of SELI. And since that beginning, we have had nearly 250 students that have participated, being in paid fellowships across our region. And that has also helped to build the capacity of over 100 different organizations that we are partnered with. So that's nonprofits, that's state agencies, that's school districts, institutions of higher education. So the next slide just gives you a snapshot of some of the organizations that we have placed with. Like I said, we work across different organizations that support education as long as they have a mission to advance equity and social justice for underserved or traditionally marginalized students. And so you will see here, we've had people at different state agencies like Georgia Department of Education. We've had people in school districts, both Bibb County Public Schools, which is in Macon, Oklahoma City Public Schools. We've also, for this last year, had someone directly placed at an institution of higher education at Virginia Union University. And we're really excited about continuing these partnerships and expanding where our fellows will be placed in the new year. So next slide. So a little more about the program logistics. I talked, here you will see some kind of high level overview of the program, though this list is not exhaustive, it just gives the major components. Again, our fellows will be placed in partner organizations based on proposed projects that our partners give us, but most importantly, based on the interest that the students express in the education space and their particular skill sets. So for 8 weeks, for 2020, beginning May 25th through July 17th, fellows will be in person at placement sites working full time. The goal is to work on a specific equity challenge or work plan that's created by our partners. These can include a number of things, including doing research, white papers, collecting data, doing communications. It can include a number of things, preparing for legislative sessions. Just as a reminder, if everyone can mute their line, we're having a little bit of background noise Thank you. But it runs the gamut. The most important thing that I want to highlight about this is that these fellowships are designed to be meaningful, high-level fellowships for our leaders. They are not to be bogged down with administrative tasks all summer, and will not be doing, may have to do some clerical work, but the goal is not to be doing running copies, making coffee, those type of things the entire summer. Like, you will be doing really substantive work that contribute to the missions of our partner organizations, and our partners really do honor this. So in addition to the 8 weeks, fellows will have to attend both an orientation to kick off the fellowship, that's here in Atlanta, and those dates are May 20th through the 22nd. And this will serve really as kind of the primer for the summer, exposing the leaders to the type of work that they'll be doing, really a solid grounding in understanding in the education issues and social justice issues that we see in the region, really getting an understanding of what equity and racial equity is, and then asking any questions to prepare for them to make the transition. From the orientation, the fellows go directly to the placement sites. Again, this will be in Atlanta, 20th through the 22nd. And then after your placement sites, fellows come back to Atlanta to do a closing meeting. And this is really an opportunity to share lessons learned, reflect on your experience, and then determine and decide and brainstorm on how you will carry the work forward. That meeting will be, again, in Atlanta, July 22nd through 24th. It's important to note here that all attendance is a critical criteria of the program. To be eligible for SELI, fellows have to attend in person both the orientation and the closing meeting. So if for some reason the fellow cannot attend either, then they are not eligible to participate. And also, again, to note that placements are full-time in-person experiences. And so fellows will not be able to work remotely from their placement sites. Also, FYI, SEF does cover the cost of travel to the orientation, to the placement sites, and to the closing. And most importantly, I think, or which is very important to a lot of fellows, is that this is a paid summer experience. So fellows do receive a stipend, as you see on the screen, which is $4,500 for undergraduates and $5,000 for graduate professional level students. So next slide. So a little bit about eligibility. I'll take a deeper dive into eligibility requirements. They're listed on the slide and can be found on any of our materials in our website. And they seem, I think, pretty straightforward, but here is a high-level overview. Generally, students should be between the ages 20 to 35. There are some exceptions made on a case-by-case basis. So if you don't fit directly in that age range, do not let that deter you from applying. Definitely reach out to me and ask questions. Me or Reagan to ask questions. Also, I think the bigger criteria is the number of credit hours that are required. In order to participate in SELI, students have to be a rising junior and have completed at least a minimum of 60 credit hours. So that is more stringent than the actual age requirement. We need undergraduates to have completed their first 2 years, and must still be a current student, although students who have just graduated from undergrad can still apply and should reach out to me if they have any questions. There is no GPA requirement, and SELI fellows come from a variety of disciplines and majors. I think the most important thing is that there's an interest in and a demonstrated commitment to social justice and education equity, and really working to improve the education system for all students. Also, writing and interpersonal skills and critical thinking skills are critically important for this process. Our goal is to send a high caliber fellow to each of our partners that can make a valuable contribution to the organization while they're there. So we will be looking at those things in the application process. Also, one other thing to highlight, because we have get quite a few questions about, SELI students or fellows must not be committed to other obligations during the time of their placement. And that generally means not taking any other jobs, any other fellowship experiences, any other internships, no courses, either summer school or test prep courses. Like this, the fellow must be able to commit to the placement site full time. And also, though not mandatory, fellows might be asked to relocate to another city for their placement. So a willingness to relocate is a plus. And the stipend that the fellows get does help with living arrangements in the other city. And so I think that is it. I think the only other thing I will highlight is just the application date, and we'll talk more about the end, so you'll see that again. But the applications are due March 1st, 2020 by 5 p.m. to us. And so next slide. So here we're going to shift into what I think is the one of the more valuable parts of this experience. You will get to hear from SELI alums. So we are going to turn that over and have them share their experience. Here, we will, in the next few minutes, we'll hear from two, Chloe Sykes and Jordan Tafari. They have joined us today. Very busy people, so we really do appreciate their time and their willingness to come share their experience. First, we'll hear from Chloe for a few moments and have an opportunity for you all to ask questions of her, and then we will hear from Jordan. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Chloe.
Thanks, Kenita. Hello, everyone. My name is Chloe Sykes. I'm a fourth-year doctoral student at the University of Texas at Austin, in Austin, Texas. And I actually was placed in the city where I live. So I did a placement in summer 2018 for the Center for Public Policy Priorities, which is based here in Austin, although they are a statewide nonprofit think tank, and education work is part of the overall comprehensive work that they do. So I was placed on their school finance project and was at the time just focusing on tracking what the state of Texas was planning to do on school finance in the upcoming legislative session, which then was this past spring, since I was summer 2018. So that legislative session was spring 2019. And I guess next slide. There's some of what I did. Yeah, so CPPP, as it's called, focuses on equity and adequacy and school finance as one part of the work they do. As I mentioned, a lot of their education work is more nested in economic opportunity work. And so that's where school finance and my placement really aligned. Next slide, please. So the two main products that I produced over the summer, and as Kenita said, I was doing research. It was desk work, but I was doing a lot of research and a lot of writing. That was how my fellowship panned out. I know for some folks, they were doing more community meetings and facilitation of coalitions. My placement was a lot more research heavy, which was good as a doctoral student for me to be able to do. So two of the main products I did was an 11-page one-pager series called Get Schooled, and they were just about different facts, and this is one example there on the screen, about school finance that often get misconstrued in school finance debates and policy battles. And so I would dig into the research around that, generate graphs and charts, and just find create really simple language in order to create these one-pagers that then they could be handed to coalition partners. They were handed to legislators, handed to other stakeholders during the legislative session and in the months preceding it. And we actually did pass. Texas is not known for equity or adequacy in their school finance system at all, but these one-pagers, and I think some of the research that I was able to generate that summer contributed to Texas passing a very large school finance bill that invested, I think it was over 9 billion, maybe 11 billion new funds into public schools. Some of that's going toward property tax relief, but overall a lot was going into a brand new investment in public schools, which we had not seen in a very long time in the state of Texas. So this work was then directly used in a lot of those advocacy efforts, so it was very worthwhile. And the other thing I did was a bilingual education primer. Unfortunately, despite a very large school finance investment, bilingual education and school funds for English language learners continues to be super underfunded in Texas. So I created about a 20 to 25 page kind of history and policy primer and just a large booklet on the history and the legislation and the funding structure for bilingual education, and then what are the policy recommendations. And I believe the 2019 summer fellow, who was also placed at CPPP, was able to update that work and expand it and get it into its final publication stages. So it was really cool to see that work grow. I don't know if I have a next slide, but I'll just share that. Oh, there we go. Oh yeah, these were what the other Get Schooled series things included. There's 11 of them. So overall, it was a really wonderful summer, a great experience. The biggest lessons I learned, and for me, this was perhaps because I was at the end of my graduate work, I'm in my final dissertation year now, was that it is worthwhile to take up the torch of education as a civil right. In a lot of education reform battles and conversations, and even in like empirical research, there's a lot of that reform heavy discourse and talk that is kind of more pushing toward privatization of public education, which is a huge concern of mine. And it seemed like sometimes even in more social justice oriented research and advocacy work, people still veered toward just focusing on education for workforce benefit or education for personal gain instead of education rooted as a civil right that is core to our society. But that's the mission of SEF, and the work that they promote that bridges research and advocacy and leadership development and community engagement as part of that is so important, and it is really not done by a lot of organizations. So the biggest lesson I learned was that is important to do, and that is a really meaningful way to root education in really meaningful work and research, and that research isn't just writing papers. Those papers go into people's hands that make really major decisions for millions of children. So it matters, and I think that SELI really benefited me personally, not only in my own growth and research skills and just in learning more information about policy and research coming together, but also I am fortunate enough to be starting a new job with an organization that has been a SELI partner in the past. And it's exactly the type of position I wanted in pursuing my doctorate. And so I think the fact that I know SELI, and I know that the approach they take to educational research and rooting racial equity in their work really showed this organization that I would be a good fit for them because they've been a SELI partner in the past. And so that was something I was able to bring to the table, and I'm super excited to continue the work there. So I look forward to any questions, but SELI is a fantastic opportunity, and I learned a lot, and I'm so grateful for it.
Thank you, Chloe, for sharing that experience. What Chloe did not mention, and of course I'll mention, not to embarrass her at all, but it came the year after Jordan's fellowship experience, but during Chloe's year, we initiated a new honor as part of the SELI fellowship, and it's called the Jenny Looney Servant Leader Award, and it's awarded to a fellow that demonstrates exceptional commitment to the work during their summer, and Chloe was actually our winner of our inaugural award, and so she received an additional stipend and was able to also direct a donation to an education cause of her choice. And so she's being very modest, and I'm sure Jordan will also be modest, but they are both were extremely talented fellows that really contributed greatly to not just their partner organizations, but the work of their states that they were placed in general. So just wanted to share that. But Chloe, before we turn it over to Jordan, I have one question. Why would you encourage another student to apply to the SELI program?
Yes. I mean, aside from just expanding your own sense of research and policy and engaged advocacy work, I would encourage someone to apply because of the cohort structure and what you can gain from your peers is so important. I was able to learn so much from the cohort structure and also so much from the work of SEF. I feel like it just like plugged me into a whole new network that I didn't have access to just alone at my institution, as many networks as there can be in school and in graduate school. That network, as I said, has, I think, ended up leading me to a position as I finished my doctorate, which I'm so excited about. But I also am still connected with that cohort. So that peer structure that is throughout the South just gave us a great sense of camaraderie and really furthered, I think, how meaningful this work is. So I would definitely encourage someone to apply if they're looking for a great network, if they want to learn things, if they want a future job, all benefits of SELI.
Thank you, Chloe. I really, really appreciate you joining us today and sharing your experience. And so, Chloe, I think we'll have a few minutes at the end when we open up to Q&A. So any additional questions for her, please hold those till then. Next, I'm gonna turn it over to Jordan to hear about his experience and the wonderful work that he did. And he was placed at One Voice in Mississippi. So without further ado, it's over to you, Jordan.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Jordan Tafari. I was a 2017 SELI alum now, and I was placed at One Voice in Jackson, Mississippi. I'm a graduate, a 2018 graduate of Morehouse College, and that's when I participated in the fellowship. That's where I attended. And directly after, I earned my master's degree at the University of Michigan in educational leadership and policy. And now I am currently working for a nonprofit called Achieve Atlanta in Atlanta, Georgia. So, next slide. Yep, so I worked at One Voice in Jackson, Mississippi. They were a nonprofit that focused on many different things, but their three main focuses were community and economic development, education, and voting rights. My project particularly focused on the education side of things. And they had three big challenges, I would say, and that was capacity building and, trying to get grants and funding to help not only, pay their employees, but also support the work that they were doing and to, raise their capacity in the community. I would say also their communications platform, so revitalizing their website and trying to get their information and their work out there to community members. And then renovation and spacing in our office, they had a lot of different things that they were doing to renovate their office space. And so they were moving from different buildings. And so one of the things that they wanted to do was sort of get a bigger space for all of the employees. And so one of the things that they were having a challenge with was renovating the office space. Yeah, next slide, please. And so I honestly had many different things that I did while I was at One Voice, a lot of which I was able to do on my own. And so that's one thing I do appreciate about the fellowship too, is that the project gave me a lot of autonomy over my work. I wasn't necessarily working in a team. A lot of it was sort of me like bringing my own ideas to the work. And a lot of these projects that you see listed were sort of my own ideas or sort of things that I initiated. The first thing that I did when I got to One Voice was I created a document that sort of updated the education legislation bill summary. So there were many different bills that were passed that year that needed to be updated and revised for One Voice to inform their community members about. And so that was one thing that I was doing, was cleaning up that document for them. Another thing that One Voice focuses on is what is known as the school to prison pipeline. In Mississippi, a lot of their education people, so to speak, call it the schoolhouse to jailhouse. And one thing that they did was sort of have a coalition of teachers, different people involved in the education landscape in Mississippi actually meet and have these meetings. So a large part of my work was organizing these events and these meetings for these members to come here and have these conversations about the school to prison pipeline, about suspension rates and dropout rates in schools that are affecting particularly African-American and Latino children in Mississippi. And so that was some very interesting work. I never actually participated in the conversations, but a large part of my work was constructing those meetings to happen. The third bullet point you will see, it says student engagement on school resource officers and know your rights. And so this was actually influenced by SEF on a large part. So we all, when I say we all, I'm speaking about the entire cohort, had to sort of create a communications tool or some sort of communications, whether that's like an infographic or some piece of communication out to community members or just for the organization at large that has some type of issue. So mine was educating students on public school students in Jackson, Mississippi on their rights in schools, and then also on school resource officers. So since One Voice focuses a large part on the school to prison pipeline, one thing that I noticed is that, at least in my research, is that SROs, school resource officers, play a large part in the school to prison pipeline. And so that's one thing that I definitely wanted to shed light to. And I wanted to make sure that families and students knew about them as well, if they didn't already. And my biggest piece, I would say, about my experience at One Voice was sort of a policy research report. And that's the fourth bullet point, says the analysis of failing school districts. So I sort of created a 16-page research report on two different school districts in Jackson, one that was doing very well academically and the other that wasn't. And sort of just comparing the two on many different factors, suspension rates, dropout rates, racial diversity in the schools, state funding, and how that affected each of those schools in particular and how those schools were being funded, academic rates, just many different things to try and compare the two and sort of tell a story as to why one may not be doing as well as the other. And that report was shared with all of their partners and community members on their website. And so that was definitely sort of like, I would say, my best project while at One Voice. It definitely took a lot of work from start to finish. And it was something that I did on my own. And it was something I was able to own. And going into grad school, at least for the application process, that was sort of the document that I used as my writing sample. And so I definitely appreciate my experience in that aspect, and that I wouldn't have had, I wouldn't necessarily say anything else to submit, but a large part of my work would have probably been school papers, but I really didn't have anything education specific, and that was something that I used for my grad school application process. And so I was definitely appreciative of creating that piece. So I don't think I have anything else after this slide, but I will say before I go into questions, what I appreciated about the fellowship overall. My previous two internships before SELI were unpaid. And so I definitely took a big sacrifice the 2 summers prior to joining SELI and using my own money. And it wasn't a lot. It was a lot of sacrifice. And I know that, some of you may have been in certain situations as well. And going into an unpaid internship is something that it's sort of very difficult if you don't have the financial backing. And so I definitely appreciated the fellowship, being able to provide us some financial support. That's definitely one thing that I appreciated. Another thing, like Chloe spoke on, was the cohort model. And so I was a junior going into my senior year that summer, and there were other juniors and seniors, and there were also grad students as well. And so I definitely appreciated the diversity in that aspect. That the fact I was able to learn from, you know, my peers, and, you know, they were on many different tracks, some in grad school, some in law school even. Another thing that I will say was that One Voice was sort of a startup, and I think a lot of organizations that are partnered with this fellowship, they need a lot of support, and that's one of the reasons why fellows go to these organizations to provide their own expertise and background, and to really support these organizations. Like Kenita spoke on, it's not just a basic internship where you know, you're making copies or getting coffee. You're definitely going to really be contributing to the work of these organizations, and they definitely need you in a sense. And so the work that you will be doing is meaningful and impactful, because some of them are just, you know, are grassroots organizations. Another thing that I don't think you spoke, I don't know if this is still a thing, but the mentorship guidance. So when I came into the fellowship, I was paired with someone who did the fellowship prior, and they were sort of like my mentor throughout the whole summer, giving me advice. And my mentor actually did my same placement the year prior, giving me advice, you know, and outside of just the fellowship alone, but just career advice as well. And ironically, they too were in a grad school program, earning their master's in education policy. And so I definitely appreciated that aspect as well. And I think the last thing I would say is I definitely appreciated the autonomy over my work. I wasn't necessarily like told what to do each and every day, but some of the things I had to do where I had to figure them out on my own. And definitely allowed me to grow, allowed me to sort of question my own work, sort of become my own person for like my checks and balances, in terms of making sure all of my work was sort of on point, I would say. And so I definitely appreciated that too. It definitely was a growing experience for me, specifically being at the experiences that I had before that. I was sort of like told what to do, in a sense, and this sort of allowed me to grow and figure it out on my own. So I don't know if that's the experience of all of the fellows, but I'm more so speaking about my placement and my experience. So yeah, now I'll open up for questions.
Thank you, Jordan, for that. You answered every single question I could have asked. I think you shared and highlighted so many valuable elements of the fellowship, and definitely the extremely important work that you did over the summer. We still today hear from our partner about the impact Jordan had on during his time there. So his point about really being able to influence and impact the work of the organization is a huge one. I'm going to actually make one quick change, and then we'll open just general Q&A. So Reagan, if you could go to the application slide, and then we'll come back to Q&A for Jordan, Chloe, and anything you have of us, that would be great. So just before, like I mentioned, before we go into take your questions, I wanted to just say highlight a few quick things about the application. The application is currently open and available, so you can start applying today, and you should take a look and start your application today if you're interested. It is on our site. You can reach out to Reagan if you are unable to find it, but it's very easy at southerneducation.org. There are a few requirements. You'll have to do an application form. We'll need your resume, so I think make sure you're taking time to update that. You'll need transcripts. Again, there is no GPA requirement, so we are not looking to weed people out based on grades. It's just a verification of your level in school, and also kind of give us a sense of the type of interest you have academically. See if it aligns with some of the social justice equity work that we do. But transcripts are not to weed anyone out. I just wanted to emphasize that. You'll need 2 letters of recommendations. Just a quick note on those letters of recommendation, like we encourage prospective fellows and applicants to take these letters seriously. Really ask someone that knows you well, that can speak to your work, your leadership ability, your character, your dedication. We do weight these recommendations heavily. And it is noted when someone submits just kind of a form letter from someone. And if you are having trouble with ideas or letters or recommendations, definitely reach out to me and we can talk about that. But those are an important part of the application. You also have a personal statement and a short answer response. And these give us a better sense of kind of your interest in the education equity space and how you think about approaching some of the challenges we see in education. And you will also need to give us references. It's not listed here, but there is also an interview step part of the process. So if you are making through the first round of requirements, you will be invited to interview and be selected. All materials will be submitted to one email, as you see on the slide, to SELI@southern-education.org. And they are all due March 1st, 2020. Any questions, any problems that arise, reach out sooner rather than later. And I do want to emphasize that SELI is a very competitive process, so please take some time to really do a good job on applications, making sure that you're proofing your work and putting some thought into your responses. Just for an idea, for this last cohort, we actually doubled the size of placements from 10 to 20 fellows, but even still, we received over 200 applications just for those 20 slots. So it is a competitive process. So please do be thoughtful about what you submit in your application. And that is it for me. It brings us to the end of our presentation. So we will go ahead and open the question up for Q&A that you might have for me about the application or process or overall experience, or specifically to our alum that have shared their experiences with us. So at this point, you can unmute and ask your question if you feel comfortable, or still feel free to kind of type it in the box. So I just saw in the box a question about the 3 references to be different from the letter writers. I will let that be the decision of the applicant, but the most important thing is that the people can speak honestly and truthfully about your work and your experience. So there could be overlap. You do get a different, the type of questions asked in a conversation about references do touch on different points in the letter. So they can be the same, but I'll leave that up to the fellow or potential fellow. That's a good question though. So, hearing no other questions or seeing any in the box, I'll go ahead and bring us to a close. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Huge thank you again to Jordan and Chloe for taking the time out of their extremely busy schedules to join us and share their experiences. Also say that though this brings us to the end of the webinar, please still feel free to reach out to us, should you have any questions. Reagan, if you could pull up that slide one more time for our contact information. If you have any questions about the application process, or if you, just have any just general questions about the experience, or if you have concerns about your eligibility, please don't hesitate to reach out. Again, I would say sooner rather than later. And I will also emphasize, if you're interested in being a fellow, to start the application sooner rather than later as well. So thank you again to everyone, and I look forward to receiving your applications.
Thank you.